I want to talk about the key issue for post-COVID Freemasonry, and that's how do we create a cohort of enthusiastic Master Masons who want to continue their learning and progress up the ladder of the lodge to the chair and possibly into Royal Arch. Freemasonry's got a problem. We've taken part in a very dangerous experiment. For 2 years we were placed in an artificial coma. The only way we could keep going was by phone, by video meetings, and it was very much an artificial ventilator. Because a lot of Freemasonry is about brotherly love and comradeship. You enjoy visiting your lodge, you enjoy visiting your mates, you enjoy the festive board, you enjoy singing afterwards, you enjoy making toasts, and you enjoy making long, boring speeches and inflicting them on your helpless brethren who can't escape. There are lots of comradely pleasures in Freemasonry, and we lost a lot during COVID. And we've now got the problem, how do we restart our ailing craft? The question I want to pose is, how well are we doing? Well, I'm sad to say it's not very well. I'm going to give you some statistics in a moment which will demonstrate quite clearly that we're failing to recruit and retain sufficient candidates to provide a steady stream of officers to sustain our lodges. UGLE are very helpful in that they publish every vernal equinox at the March General Purposes Committee meeting 2 very important numbers. One is the number of active lodges, and the other is the number of Grand Lodge certificates issued in the previous year. Those 2 numbers form an important ratio. There's a very simple statistical method you can use, which I published about 2 or 3 years ago when we went into COVID, and it's called the F number, F standing for Freemasonry, as distinct from the R number that we all became so familiar with. If you divide the number of Grand Lodge certificates issued each year by the number of active lodges, you have a measure of growth. If F is above 1, you have a candidate for the ladder in every single lodge. If F is below 1, you have some lodges which have no candidates to progress, and that means you have to recycle past masters or other brethren, and they get bored, and eventually they get fed up and walk. So if F is above 1, then Freemasonry grows. If it falls below 1, Freemasonry dies. Let me show you the results. I'm going to go back to the good times. That number reached 8 and a bit immediately after the First World War. We had a tremendous surge of candidates coming into Freemasonry immediately after World War I, and it led to an enormous growth in lodges. The red number is lodges that were created. The blue number is the F number. Even during the First World War, it didn't dip below 2.2. It then climbed again after the Second World War, and then it declined gradually until around the year 2000 we were bumping along at 1. I'm going to show you that in more detail. Now you can see what effect that's having on lodges. If you cannot provide officers to go up the ladder of the lodge will eventually cease to exist. And over the last 12 months, 800 lodges in England and Wales have returned their warrants. Now, that's what the F number has been doing for the last 11 years. It hadn't dropped below 1 in our entire previous history, and that goes right back to 1717, but I didn't bore you with those statistics. It's never been below 1. It's always been around 1.5 or 2 at its lowest. In 2012, it dropped to 1, and then it fell below 1, came back a little bit in 2016, dropped again, and just as we were starting to get the hang of how to make Freemasonry work in the modern day, COVID hit us. It dropped in the first year because we had a few candidates in the pipeline. In the second year, when lockdown had been biting, it dropped down to 0.27. That means 3/4 of our lodges were in trouble. It's picked up a little bit. It's picked up to just a little bit above 0.8. I did ask Stuart, your provincial Grand Mentor, how West Lancashire was doing, and you checked, didn't you?
I checked as best I could. We are above 0.8, 0.85, 0.84, something like that.
So, having looked at the number of lodges that we lost, one thing is very clear. Freemasonry is losing more lodges in the south than it is in the north. The lodges furthest to the north are doing something better than they're managing to do in the south, because the overall figure is about 8.1 and Europe about 8.5. Some provinces in the south are not doing anything like as well. So we need to ask the question, why? If we're going to survive, we've got to make more Master Masons. So the question is, how are we going to do it? Well, we've got to think about what is our purpose. What is Freemasonry about? What was it created for? We do three things. We all know it's based on three grand principles: brotherly love, relief and truth. We're pretty good at friendship and dining clubs and networking. We're pretty good at offering opportunities to support charitable causes and bringing people together to do that. But we also offer access to ancient philosophical secrets that we've known about for hundreds of years, but have neglected a little. We are not the best forum for dining or networking. Join your golf club, join LinkedIn, join your university alumni society. You'll get far better opportunities for networking than you will in Freemasonry. You won't meet such interesting people, but you'll get opportunities to network. And if you want to take up charity, support the RNLI, join Oxfam, there's many efficient ways of doing it. You don't have to spend £200 or £300 joining a lodge and money buying regalia in order to contribute to charity. So yes, we do it because it's part of our raison d'etre. We were established to study the basic and important philosophical questions of life. We're the only well-established worldwide secular society which offers ancient teaching going back hundreds of years about the great questions of life. And the questions we ask is, why are we here and what is our purpose? Now, my little market research field test with Luke confirmed what I've been suspecting for a while. A lot of our recruits since COVID are interested in learning our secrets. And it's a shared purpose that arises from the common philosophical position that we demand all our candidates for membership. Luke, when you were initiated, you were asked a question: in whom do you put your trust? How did you answer?
In God.
So Luke believes there is a source of order. You weren't asked about the nature of your God, or how you understood it, or where you worshipped, or which Sunday school you'd been to, or how much you put in the collection box, because that's nothing to do with Freemasonry. We're not a religion. What we're interested in is whether our candidates believe there is a source of order in the universe which can be studied and which can be understood. That willingness to affirm a belief in some purpose and order at the centre of existence is what lies at the centre of the appeal of Freemasonry over the years. It's why we've lasted for 600 years, 300 of which have been covered by UGLE. But it goes back to the Kirkwall Scroll in 1480 and Chris Wright, the first master of the Lodge of Aberdeen. I'm wearing a badge today that I was actually given in November 2019. It's got a West Lancashire badge on it. It was a meeting of the Light Blues Club. It was to talk about how we can develop membership. I did record that speech that I made last wearing that badge. It's on my YouTube channel if you want to look it up and listen to it. And it's when I met Stuart and we decided something needed to be done. In that speech, I outlined the basis of an interactive education system to address the question. It's not really good enough to simply create a great online resource and say, there, help yourself, have a look. You don't know what you're looking for. Freemasonry has always worked because the proposer and seconder of a candidate has taken care of that candidate and guided them. It's something we've tended to neglect a little bit, and it's possibly because not all the proposers and seconders are aware of the material that's available within Freemasonry for them to teach. We started to look at this issue. I've just given you a copy, Luke, of the booklet that came out of that, which are the duties of a lodge to its apprentices. It's the lodge's duty to look after you and teach you and encourage you, not simply throw lots of online material and say, sort it out yourself. That's not going to help. Then we locked down, and by 2021, as I showed you, the F number had fallen to 0.27. Since then, we've lost 1,000 lodges. They've handed in their warrants because they were unable to officer their lodges. Now, since we've reopened, I've personally been testing this system in a small number of lodges. I'm wearing an East Lancs tie because 2 of the lodges are in Salford, both of which I am organist and an honorary member at, and they were both struggling greatly. Neither of them could fully officer a lodge, but we worked together. I happened to be in both lodges. I knew members in both lodges. I was playing the organ for both of them when they restarted. We met on different nights, so we shared officers. And for the best part of 18 months, every ceremony was officered by officers from both lodges. Not necessarily fulfilling the same office they did in their own lodge. You know, the immediate past master was the inner guard in one of the lodges at one time because we didn't have one. They filled whichever office was needed, and we got them through. We also took care of our stranded apprentice and our stranded fellowcrafts by issuing them with podcasts and videos and online meetings to keep up their interest, so that when we could move them on, we could move them on to the ladder. I'll share a little secret with you, Luke, about Freemasonry. You start by having Freemasonry done to you. You enter as a poor candidate in the state of darkness, and you're guided round by the deacons. You then, when you've completed your Master Mason's degree, there are then a whole series of officers you follow. You become an inner guard, a junior deacon, a senior deacon, a junior warden, a senior warden, and eventually you become the worshipful master. That's something to look forward to. And in each one you learn something more. So as a candidate, before you become a Master Mason, you have Freemasonry done to you. Then as an officer of the lodge, you do Freemasonry to other people. And then eventually you reach the stage of being the immediate past master. And you don't fall off the planet. You then watch other people having Freemasonry done to them by people who are doing it, and you reflect on what it all means and you start to understand it. So Freemasonry doesn't stop by becoming a Master Mason or even becoming a companion of the Royal Arch. You need to progress through the offices before you are fully going to understand it. And to do that, you need knowledge. How do you make Master Masons who want to stay? The way we've traditionally done it is the proposer and seconder acted as tutors for the candidate, looked after them, took them to visit an initiation. Have you seen an initiation yet? Get your proposer to take you to one and guide you, because you haven't seen a lodge open yet, so you're going to have to learn lots of things like how to stand properly and how to give the proper signs. Otherwise they'll throw you out. Your proposer should take you in and do that for you. You need to see an initiation ceremony as soon as you possibly can. During the enforced period of lockdown, I spent 18 months where I didn't actually go off my own land. I had to amuse myself. So what I've done is put together a complete support system, which I provided to Stuart as it was created, and you used it to help with your standard fellowcrafts. And I've now ended up with a complete educational system, which I've been using in my Salford and Welsh lodges, which I'm now allowed to visit. Admittedly, I'll have to travel at 20 miles an hour for the last few miles to get there, which is going to add about 20 minutes to my journey. But what I put together is a set of tutors' handbooks. Luke's got the first one. Stuart's got the second one about a fellowcraft. And there's a third one which will be out in a couple of weeks, which I've been testing in the lodges I've been supporting. And I discovered the main problem with proposers was that they didn't know the basic teachings of the craft. They weren't familiar with delivering the tracing board. How many of you can deliver the tracing board from memory? First degree. We've got 3 people in our lodges. It's a long piece, but the result is, if you've got nobody who can deliver the tracing board, and we're all out of practice, then the only way you can do it is to provide a video. So I have created quite a few videos with a number of different tracing boards, because different lodges have different tracing boards. You can pick one according to the tracing board you favour. The wording's the same, the bits you see are different. So I created a set of tutors' handbooks to help the tutor and the tutee learn together. You'll see, Luke, it advises you to let your tutee guide you through it and answer your questions. The Fellowcraft one, you work together, the tutee, and you visit interesting sites made famous by interesting Freemasons. For instance, we're sitting outside a basin built by Brother Brimley, who created that canal and was a Freemason. Brother Telford, who built the Menai Bridge, was a Freemason. Brother George Stevenson, who built the first intercity railway between Liverpool and Manchester, was a Freemason. They all applied the message of the second degree to study the hidden mysteries of nature and science. We've forgotten sometimes that they were even Freemasons, let alone what they actually did for society. What I've tried to do is put together an extensive library of well-tested online material material to cover the ancient symbolism and the ancient syllabus of Masonic progression. But what is that? Well, it starts with recruitment. It starts with a white table night or a gavel night. And this is where the lodge opens up, invites guests, closes, and then invites the guests into the temple so they can see how silly we look wearing all our pinnies and collars and ties and gloves and what have you. And we even get the Siler to come in waving his sword and roll up his trouser leg just to prove we can do it. We then give the talk in that temple, not giving away any secrets, but we explain what our purposes are and our background and our basic principles of brotherly love, relief and truth, and how they apply in practice and why they're important in the modern day. And then anybody who's still interested after that onslaught are invited to attend festive boards on a regular basis after the regular meetings to get to know the brethren. We also follow up using one of the tricks of educational psychologists. 24 hours after the talk has been given, we provide them with a podcast of that talk, which they can listen to on their phone, and a PDF with it written. And I think you've used that as well, haven't you, Stuart? And the result is that we find people are interested. We then move on to the syllabus that needs to be followed before you move people on, if you're going to satisfy the interest in our ancient secrets. Young men and young women are not joining Freemasonry because they want to be better at doing charity or they want to be better at networking. They're joining because we have ancient teachings about the meaning of life which we can share with them. What I've created is a booklet, which I've just given Luke a copy of. I launched that at this meeting in 2019 in this province, and it's been used since then. It covers all the necessary information for a proposer, a detailed description of the ceremony, a complete ritual of the tracing board, which can either be learnt or read out, and a series of action learning tasks. To go and visit an initiation, to find out who's the oldest past master in the lodge, and go up to him and say, "Hello, I'm Luke. I've just joined. Why do you still bother coming at your age?" And see what he says to you. He'll know you, you'll know him, and I'll bet you end up having a very interesting conversation with him. There's all sorts of things you can do that can introduce your entered apprentices to the lodge. And then you take them through a series of steps. The first thing to do is attend an initiation ceremony as an observer. Complete the introductory tasks so that you know the members of your lodge. Then there are a series of videos to watch. An explanatory lecture describing the purpose and delivery of the first degree, which I originally put as a written form. Then I recorded it live and overlaid the slides onto it and turned it into a video. Then a ritual presentation of the first degree tracing board. And then I go back to some of the earliest teachings of Freemasonry. And these are a series of catechismal lectures which were put together and approved at the formation of United Grand Lodge of England, but actually stemmed from the Scottish lodges. Catechismal means question and answer. You'll have met some of this. Where were you first prepared to be made a Mason?
Outside the lodge's doors.
Not quite. Where were you first prepared to be made a Mason?
In my heart.
And where next?
In the body of the lodge.
He was right. You got the second question right. But the first question was, in my heart. At one time, you learnt about 300 catechismal questions, and the lodge would pick some questions and ask you them. They make it a bit easier now, because they've chosen a few that you learn, and every lodge has got different test questions. At one time, the master would pick a few questions and ask them you. Now you get warning of the questions. But at the end, he does something very scary. He says, if any brother would like me to put further questions, I will be quite happy to. And he could choose any one from the 7 catechismal lectures, and you'd be expected to answer it. Very rarely does anybody ask those questions, although I have mischievously done it once or twice. The catechismal lectures teach you an awful lot about the degree. I've had them on my Web of Hiram support site that I set up at the University of Bradford 25 years ago. They've been available, but they weren't very widely used. I monitored the traffic on them. Since I've turned them into podcasts, people are using them, listening to them and enjoying them. So those podcasts are available through Stuart. At that point, whoever gave you that lecture, you are free at any stage to ask them questions about it. Now, this was something that a lot of proposers were finding a bit frightening. I came up with a simple answer. It's got all the awkward questions that I've been asked about the catechismal lectures over the last 5 years and how to answer them. And I really get excited if somebody asks a question I've not heard before, because it gives me an opportunity to think it through and put an answer down. That means that the proposer doesn't have to be worried that they're going to be asked a question that they can't answer, because there's backup. The last thing I provide is a learning podcast which teaches them the test questions. And the way it does it, you get an agreed set of test questions from the lodge. That's the hardest part, getting the past masters to agree what are the test questions and the exact wording of them. And then I use artificial intelligence to voice that and then leave you a gap to repeat it. And the result has been I've had a series of candidates standing up to answer their test questions, and they've not needed prompting and they've not needed helping. The lodge has been proud of them, I've been proud of them, and they've been proud of themselves. But I've also added to it a series of explanatory photons. Now, I'm a physicist, and when I originally set up the Masonic Light programme for Yorkshire West Riding back in 2002, it morphed into a very successful programme. But the short pieces that were delivered in lodges got called nuggets. It's something I never agreed with. The reason being that if you go to the darkest remote corners of Yorkshire, nugget has a particularly abusive meaning. He's a right nugget, isn't he? So you really don't want to be spouting nuggets. But I thought, we're trying to spread Masonic light, I'll call them photons. And it's the smallest fragment of Masonic ritual which can have meaning. For the Fellowcraft, I've got a library of private explanatory videos and podcasts, a tutor support discussion board, and a series of explanatory photons, which also tell you about famous Fellowcrafts and their works, and suggest where you can go and have a look at them. Now, the syllabus for a Fellowcraft is a tender passing ceremony as observer as soon as possible after you've been passed, because you don't really take it in when you're actually taking part. And that will give you an opportunity to see what happens. We'll do another quick test. How many of you can deliver the tracing board of the second degree? That's better. It's a shorter one as well. That's also in the booklet, the full ritual of it, which you can either learn to deliver, or you can play it as a podcast in front of your own tracing board and let the podcast play on a Bluetooth speaker and just point out the bits, or you can watch it on a video. It's versatile. It means there's no excuse for not delivering the second degree tracing board at a lodge of instruction. There are only 5 catechismal lectures where you can learn another 200 questions and answers beyond the ones that you set as a Fellowcraft. I also provide training podcasts for each lodge, which gives me an agreed set of test questions that I can convert. I've given up trying to offer them from other lodges because they say, we don't do it like that. And the question then has to be, well, how do you do it? Would you mind writing it down and sending it to me? I'll quickly turn this into a podcast. And using AI, it's easy. Most of the podcasts I created the hard way, by reading them out, editing them and correcting them and turning them into an MP3. These I do very quickly because I use an artificial voice and it just repeats what's there. And it works. It's very emotionless. I like to think my podcasts are more fun to listen to. I might be mistaken, but the artificial voice transfers the information and it lets you learn and follow it. And you can put the emotion in yourself. That's the syllabus for a Fellowcraft. Then we move on to the Master Mason. Nobody's got a copy of that because I've got the only proof copy, and it will be published within the next week or so. It's again a detailed guidance booklet, and it covers all the information needed for a proposer to support their candidate. There's again a library of explanatory videos and podcasts, a tutor support discussion board. I'm doing something which Freemasonry has been doing for a long time, and we don't really talk about a lot. I've put an action learning task for you to devise a plan to develop your soul. Effectively, once you're a Master Mason, you'll have a toolbox of 9 working tools. And if you consider these as civil engineering tools and you then use them to create a building plan for creating the building of yourself, because Freemasonry is about building your character, your personality, your soul. And it teaches you how to do it using symbols and ritual. Now, if you're not given a plan, and I suspect in a lot of English lodges you might not be, then you have to work one out for yourself. There's a document there which explains what the tools are, how they're used, how they're brought together, and what their purposes are, and how you can model them into a construction plan to build your own soul. There's a syllabus. Attend a raising ceremony as an observer. Watch what happens. Learn to use all 9 of your working tools. By the time you get to the Royal Arch, if you've done the full course, you will actually have 15 working tools, because you get 3 as an install master and 3 as a Royal Arch companion. And they can be used, explained as symbols of operative masonry or moralised as speculative masonry. The important thing is, as a master mason, you need to learn to use the first 9 tools you've got, and you need to understand them, and you need to apply them, and you then need to progress and use them as you work your way up the ladder, learning different skills from each of the offices until you become the master. At which stage you should be given 3 tools to help you rule the lodge. Interestingly, there's a clue in this syllabus that this can't possibly be the end of the sequence. At every degree, you're given a test of merit to pass on to the next one, a series of test questions you have to learn the answers to. At the end of the 3rd degree, you're given a test of merit with a series of test questions that you have to learn the answer to. But you never use them in the lodge. They're not used in the opening. If you decide you want to become a companion of the Holy Royal Arch of Jerusalem, the guardian of the door of the lodge, who is not a tiler, he's called a janitor, but he has a big sharp sword for getting rid of all cowans and intruders to Royal Arch Freemasonry, not just Freemasonry, he's specific. You can get yourself skewered even if you're wearing a Master Mason's apron. You have to prove yourself to be a true Master Mason, and you use the test of merit. You'll be asked those questions before you are allowed to enter a Royal Arch chapter as a candidate for exaltation. So there was a point in giving them to you. Now, do you have to join another order and get another set of regalia? Unfortunately, yes. If you go back before 1817, you didn't. It all used to be done in the same lodge, and the lodge would open as a chapter and put a sash on. The officers would move about. There is a teaching narrative that underpins Freemasonry. It starts with a poor candidate in a state of darkness seeking light. It leads you to develop your mind by studying the hidden mysteries of nature and science. It enables you to contemplate your own ego and its mortality. And it leads you on to consider what is the consequence of that knowledge that you are mortal and what to do about it. And that's the culmination in the Royal Arch. Now, to be honest, you really should have done the Mark degree on the way, because the Royal Arch is the completion of the 2nd degree, not the 3rd. The 3rd degree is the completion of the Mark, which you haven't done. And if you haven't done it, it makes very little sense to you, and it's quite a disappointment. If you had done it first, which you used to have to do prior to 1817, then you would have been aware of certain facts which would have made you think, hey up, they must have hidden them somewhere. Unfortunately, that's got lost. What I'm suggesting to you is that if you want Freemasonry to be passed on unsullied to the next generations, then we've got to go back to the old personal and verbal methods of passing on secret knowledge to the craft. You can't do it with a website. It's done personally, by personal instruction and by interacting with your candidates. So we need a cohort of Masonic tutors. It's not an office that gets you a penny or a badge or even any acclaim. It's a job that used to be done freely and willingly by a proposer and seconder. And I'm suggesting that's the person who should really be the tutor for an individual candidate. But because of the neglect of the ancient teachings, not every proposer is equipped. So I've provided the material, and if you want access to the detailed online material, you will be able to get it through Stuart. So I'm suggesting we need to encourage the old practice of the proposer tutoring the candidate. Or if they're not up to it and don't want to do it, get somebody in the lodge who will do it. Timely provision of the explanatory lectures. It means you cover the whole syllabus at the entered apprentice degree before you move on to the Fellowcraft degree. The tutor should know when the raising ceremony is scheduled and make sure that they feed them out. You don't just dump the lot on them and say, sort that out, mate. You give them one at a time, you answer the questions, you say, did you understand that? Do you want to talk about it? Ideally done at a practice meeting, but it can easily be done with a video meeting or a phone call. But it needs to be done, not just let them get on with it. It involves a full provision of explanatory lectures, a full ritual explanation of the tracing boards, which if you're not able to give them yourself, and not everybody is, you can read them, you can use a podcast in front of your own lodge's tracing board, or you can use a video. But don't forget to do it. And then the traditional catechismal lectures, which were agreed at the combination of the ancients and the moderns as the true philosophical secrets of Freemasonry. Nobody argues that's what they are. We just stopped teaching them for some reason. I suggest that we go back to teaching them regularly to each of our candidates. The teaching of the tracing boards gets overlooked. I've made it easy. You've got podcasts and videos which you can access as a trusted Mason through your provincial Grand Mentor and deliver. I've developed the descriptive lectures over 20 years ago, and I use them for the highly successful Masonic Light programme. The problem I had was I found it difficult to recruit lecturers to deliver the material. They weren't comfortable doing it and they didn't like reading it. So I've simply recorded them live and put them on as videos. I still provide scripts and PowerPoint slides within the support portal if you want to deliver the lectures yourself. And there's no reason why you shouldn't. And the more you deliver them, the more you understand what you're talking about. I've recorded live performances and videos to make the content easily available. What I realised when my Salford lodges started to re-meet was that I'd got all the elements of an integrated education programme, which I'd created for different reasons, mainly to help out with stranded Fellowcrafts, stranded entered apprentices, and stranded Master Masons who weren't able to get any teaching. I'm no longer delivering this educational material. Master Masons who have gone through this course are now administering it to the newcomers. The result is we're ending up with a cohort of enthusiastic Master Masons who want to progress up the ladder and who know what they're doing and are looking forward to each office. And the little trick of using an artificial voice to learn the ritual of the test questions we're also using for training the officers. You learn the words and then you go to a practice night so that you learn the floor work and how to move and the signs to do. The biggest problem with that was getting an agreed copy of the ritual from each of the lodges, because they both work different rituals and the past masters don't agree on what is the accurate ritual. 12 months to get the ritual together and a week and a half to create the training modules. I've ended up with a series of candidates who haven't needed prompting when they deliver their test questions. They deliver them calmly and readily because they learn the questions as well as the answers and they're automatic in responding. It looks good and they enjoy it. The first graduate Master Masons of this course that I've been running now for about 18 months in North Wales and East Lancashire are now teaching it to their successors. It's freely available to use through your mentor if you want to use it. Don't worry about being asked questions you can't answer. You can refer to Stuart first, and if he can't answer it, I will be able to answer it for you, I promise. I've tested it in half a dozen lodges in 4 different provinces. I've trained a cohort of keen Master Masons who love teaching and learning and joined to learn the ancient secrets and want to pass them on. And I'm encouraging them to use the traditional material and deliver it to new members as it was intended to for the last 200 years. And they're proving very good at it. What I'm hoping, this growing group of Masonic tutors make their way up the lodge ladder, they're going to be passing on this ancient life knowledge of our craft to a new generation who've joined to learn about our way of studying truth and answer the questions, why are we here? And what are we for? Luke's told you he's joined to learn our philosophical secrets. Make sure you teach him them. Our old teaching methods in a new hybrid formulation so that we are not disappointing them. I think we can push the F number back above 1, and I think we can restore our craft to its former glory. But what we need to do is work together so that we make more enthusiastic Master Masons to populate our lodges again. All I can do is end by welcoming Luke into our fraternity and saying the future is in your hands. We can restore Freemasonry. We're not going to restore it by trying to pretend that we're a charity. We're not going to restore it by pretending we're a networking club. We do it, but we're not the best people at doing it. The one unique selling proposition we have got is that we have spent the last 600 years studying the nature of truth and the meaning of life. And we've done it through symbols, ritual and storytelling. If we return to that, we'll thrive for another 600 years. Thank you, brethren.